Hello, hello, hello. Greetings to you all. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our visitors today, tapping into this week's Black Mental Health Matters show, where we engage in conversation to deepen our learning about mental health challenges that are impacting the global Black community. I am your host, Rihanna Ebanks-Babb, and today we'll be delving into a discussion about stress and anxiety and how we as a community can better understand and manage that, it's okay to not be okay. And we will be discussing this topic with our wonderful guest, Sonia Hart. But for the meantime, please sit back, enjoy our intro video, and I will be with you shortly. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, welcome back. As I mentioned before, my name is Rihanna Ebanks-Babb, and you are watching Black Mental Health Matters. And this week's show, we'll be discussing stress and anxiety and how we as a community can better understand that it's okay not to be okay, discuss strategies for overcoming stress and anxiety, and how to best recognize it. So, today I will be joined by Sonia Hart. And let's bring Sonia on to give a beautiful introduction to herself because, as you know, our guests do it best. Welcome, Sonia. Welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, thank you. Thanks for having me
Wonderful.
on the show today. I am a religious science practitioner, and what I do is offer spiritual guidance and support to clients.
Amazing, amazing. And I feel that this will be such a great conversation because a lot of the time there is this disconnect between understanding mental health and how stress and anxiety prevails within our communities. And many Black communities are either quite religious or spiritual. So I think this will be a great discussion to understand from your perspective as well how we can better manage these issues that we face within our global Black communities. So let's kick off with the discussion with just defining what stress and anxiety means to you and how they relate to each other.
Stress and anxiety are intimately linked because when you have stress, you are going to feel that sense of anxiousness.
Hmm.
Um, for most persons, the definition for stress is, psychological and physiological, where your body is responding to conditions that
Hmm.
are not in keeping with a happy mental state. And as I
Mm.
said, anxiety is a spin off of stress.
Mm.
Once you're stressed, you tend to, or it could be either way, where you're anxious about something and then the body becomes stressed.
Mm. That's very true. That's very true. And for our viewers, I think it will be really helpful to understand what are some of the main risk factors and symptoms of stress.
For some people, stress can manifest physically,
Hmm.
where you have tensions in the body and you're not feeling well, your blood pressure is up. Um, if you are diabetic, for example, stress can really send your sugar levels up as well. There are some people who, when they're stressed, their sugar just becomes all over the place.
Hmm. Hmm.
In addition to that, stress can also make you withdraw from people. You feel that sense of laziness in terms of interacting with people. And I
Hmm.
would tend to think that it is also linked to being depressed.
Mm.
That when you're stressed, you tend to open up yourself to depression. You don't handle your everyday functioning in the same capacity. I think
Mm.
because a lot of us do not recognize the changes, because stress can be so subtle in some people. We don't
Yes.
recognize the changes that are taking place in a person. We think, oh, they're just acting out, they're just behaving badly or whatever. But stress is a real illness in and of itself that
Mm.
can trigger so many other things, not just psychologically, but physically. It manifests in the body. The body releases cortisol when you're stressed. And if you know anything about the human body and stress, it brings on all the other illnesses. It can activate cancer cells that have been dormant for a while, send your blood pressure up. It can manifest in so many different ways in terms of the physiological body.
Yes.
Psychologically, your emotions are all over the place. You may not be able to connect to people. And if you are a family person, that also impacts the moods of everyone around you, because they do not know, in most cases, how to deal with the stressed person.
Yes.
So
Yes.
stress can lead to so many other illnesses. And by illnesses, I mean negative effects.
Yes. Yes. And I liked what you mentioned about how the stressed person can impact the people around them as well, because I think a lot of the time we individualize stress, but the actual impact, the social impact of stress really can impact those that are around you, whether it's friends, families, colleagues. And they can, pick up on that stressful energy, and it can lead to all different types of stress for them as well, seeing you in distress yourself. But what are the different types of stress? I know you mentioned about cortisol in the body, and I think that's really important as well, because not many people understand the chemical aspects of stress. But what are the different types of stress where cortisol, is quite heightened, or not as much, where it can lead to different types of ailments and illnesses such as burnout or fatigue or overwhelm?
Well, there are basically three types of stress. We have an acute stress, episodic acute stress, or chronic stress.
Mm.
And stress is stress, you know.
Yeah.
At least for me, stress is stress. We can define it in all these different areas, but when you are stressed, you are stressed.
Yeah.
I mean, for
Yeah.
some people, it happens every day. For some people, occasionally, like you may have a big medical bill and your income does not support it, and you feel stressed over that. That
Mm.
is a short term kind of stress, because once you get over that bill, then you're back to your normal, happy and stress free self.
Mm.
Um, but then you have situations where you might be in a job that you have a boss who is constantly nagging and picking on you, and that can be stressful,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know, especially if it comes down to, okay, you have deadlines to meet, and you have these little episodes of stress going on.
Mm.
But chronic stress, that's a different kind of thing altogether. With chronic stress, as the word chronic suggests, you have
Mm.
a long term stress going on in your life. It is, and I'm going to go into this, like, for example, young black men living in the USA, I believe they're constantly under stress when they drive certain types of cars, or you know
Mm.
they're seen in a certain area at a certain time,
Yeah.
and knowing, having that knowledge that because of your color you can be shot, just because you may stand up for your rights with the police officers. So I'm not going to go and say, well, I really shouldn't say, well, this is a fact, but this is me looking on from the outside, observing and listening to stories coming out of the USA, with
Mm.
young people being taught from, especially young black men being taught from very young, to comply when a police officer stops you. So
Mm.
things like this can impact your stress level.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think chronic stress is not recognized by a lot of people, because some people will say, well, oh, this is how this person normally behaves. That's their
Yeah.
behavior. But our behaviors are shaped by our environment, more or less,
Yeah.
what is happening at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I would just kind of like to add to that is when you are continuously having um stressful situations presented in your life. I know I mentioned the term burnout, that is kind of a bit of a buzzword at the moment. I would say definitely Western culture, but um, understanding that burnout is a product of continued stress that isn't maintained or managed well. And it also encompassing fatigue. So, understanding when your body is um, overly tired and hasn't had the ability or time to rest. And I don't just mean sleep, I mean actual mental, spiritual rest as well. Um, it can also lead to overwhelm, which then leads into these various different forms of stress. And I think where you mentioned about not recognizing it, a lot of the time we minimize the stresses in our lives in order for us to continue going, and continue going. And that's where I believe a lot of the burnout leads to. Um, and I just wanted to ask, I will solely hold up my hand that I've definitely experienced stress, anxiety, burnout, fatigue, all of that kind of stuff. But tell me, have you? And tell me a bit about the experience if you have.
Well, I have experienced stress. I have experienced stress. I've experienced anxiety, depression.
Mm,
Being human means that you will have experiences that take you to that place of darkness.
yeah,
You know, my experience with stress is that my body picks it up.
yeah,
When I'm stressed, my body picks it up. I feel lethargic. The energy to do things is just not there. And
mm,
it is a constant, when you're in that place, it's a constant self-talk. You got to get over this.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um, One of the things that I do when I am stressed is that I would go to my spiritual community
mm,
for prayer, affirmative prayer,
yeah,
for that support. um, Here in Barbados we have the beaches, and
mm,
that for me too can be very soothing.
mm, mm,
So for me, being stressed is not my best place to be, because it impairs my ability to be productive.
mm,
Yeah, but I've had my moments of stress. I've had my moments of stress, like when it's time to have my daughters going to school and your bank account doesn't look right. You say, oh my goodness, where am I going to get all of this from? And
yeah,
it is what it is. But there are ways of managing your stress level.
mm, mm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned the beaches in Barbados. While I've never been, I'm a big advocate for ecotherapy and nature-related therapies because we over we overcomplicate how to deal with some of the minimal things in our lives, such as stress. And whilst they can lead into more major mental health conditions, a lot of the underlying things and the basic things we kind of take for granted and overlook as a way to, manage our basic needs. So I love the fact that you walk along the beaches. I'm sure they're very white with the sand and blue seas. That's how I picture Barbados anyway.
And a little bit of green here and there.
Yeah.
I like to think of the island as a green island, very healing. I think
Mm,
it is a great destination for emotional and spiritual recovery.
mm,
You don't have to
amazing.
get involved with all of the partying stuff and the usual touristy things, but you can come to the island and just truly relax.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Um, and I'm sure the viewers can probably hear. I live in Britain. For those of you that don't know, more specifically, in London, and I believe that a lot of people that live in Western cultures, um, sometimes they experience a greater deal of stress, and different forms of stress and how they are manifested in different ways. And the reason why I say that is because not living in, say, a host country that looks like you, accepts you fully, and we can definitely experience a lot of issues related to race related stress. So I just wanted to get your perspective on whether you've experienced race related stress or whether you know anyone that has and how they dealt with it.
I always say to people that for me, living in Barbados is one of the best things that I've ever
Mm,
experienced because there's no, for me, I've not experienced direct racism.
hmm
I know that what we have, and you would hear a lot of people say this is classism,
mm,
not that racism does not exist. I'm sure that there are people on the island who are racist. And very often, when we speak of racism, we tend to have this idea that racism is a one way street.
hmm hmm
But there are Black people who are very racist as well, who have ideas of intolerance. And I think our racism comes from the way in which we are schooled into thinking that are oppressed to this day because of our financial situation, the financial inequalities.
mm,
So if you're talking about Barbados, racism is seen based on financial inequalities.
mm,
But in terms of head on racism, that is not the case here in a lot of situations. We don't have that. So to be say that we have racial stress would be challenging.
mm,
Race related anxiety, to speak to that again, would be challenging.
mm,
Um, because we don't have those tensions going on where there is a fight between the blacks here and the Caucasians here. On the
mm.
surface, on the surface, you could say that we get along.
Yeah.
On the surface, you can say that we get along. And I think that that would be due to the fact that the Barbadian Caucasians would have been here as indentured servants. And yes,
Mm,
some of them may have been from the plantocracy um, background, but the majority of whites on the island would have been from the indentured servant era.
hmm
And growing into that community of living among Black people, I guess, kind of like, we don't have time for that.
mm,
Don't have
mm,
time to be racist when you're just a little bit above. the others in terms of your financial status. And I think that's it in Barbados.
Mm.
We're judged based on financial status. So there was a time, there was a time when racism would have been based on the different shades of black.
Yeah.
You had preferential treatment for those who were light in complexion.
Yeah.
But do we face racial stress in Barbados? I cannot really speak. I can't say yes, I can't say no. I live
Mm.
next door to Caucasians.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I live in a neighborhood that reflects that where you have Caucasians, you have people of the Indio background, and you have
Yeah.
blacks. Um, we are cordial with each other,
Yeah.
but we're not friends.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a specific reason why you framed it that way? Would you like to share or
Oh, we're not friends. That's all I can
that's
say. We're cordial with each other, but we're not friends. I cannot say that I socialize with Caucasian people in the
mm.
same way that I socialize with my own people.
Mm-hmm.
We're sociable, we speak to each other. If there's a function and we're at the same function, we will acknowledge each other.
Mm.
But
Mm.
for the most part, um, it would be, how should I say this? I think here on the island, we do not fool ourselves that Caucasians and blacks are bosom buddies. We don't
Mm.
fool ourselves like that. There is that cordial relationship going on, but do we fight with each other? No. I think racism in Barbados is felt more at an economic level
Yeah.
than a social level.
Yeah. Yeah. That's understandable, definitely. And um particularly with a lot of the global crises that's happening post COVID, there's a lot of more understanding around the economic disadvantage of all people in different countries, and I think that that's where a lot of Western and Eastern countries have a bit of commonality there, where the cost of living and just the way that we're living, our quality of life is depreciating kind of worldwide because there's so much happening, whether it is debts from COVID or investment in countries where we maybe don't have, space to be. All different kinds of things that are impacting individual countries, individual families, and people, where it can feed into their own internal narrative of anxiety, their own internal stresses. And I just wanted to kind of ask you, from your perspective, what does the term "it's okay not to be okay" mean to you? And before you answer, the reason why I asked that is because this is the name of the show today, but I find a lot of the time, particularly money related things, we don't talk about like financial related stress in our communities a lot of the time. I can definitely say, like, finances, talking about it with friends and family can always be quite difficult. And even when you are struggling, sometimes you're just like, yeah, I'm okay. But when when you're not okay, I think it's very, very important to speak up, ask for help, and so on and so forth. So without me rambling, what does the term "it's okay not to be okay" mean to you, Sonia?
It means just what it says. It's okay not to be okay. But by the same token, once you've acknowledged that it's okay not to be okay, what are you going to do to get back to that place of being okay?
Mm.
And I first heard this term about 5 years ago from a friend who lives in the USA. She didn't say live, she is an American, and she has this television show called Fun. And her, I want to say, slogan is "It's okay not to be okay." And her show deals primarily with women and the issues that they go through economically, things like domestic violence and
mm,
divorce, those kind of issues, and basically is there's always that support for us when we're not okay. And
mm,
I would say it's okay not to be okay. It is to own it, but while owning it, doing something to make sure that you're okay. You don't want to stay in a state of I am not okay forever, because
mm,
that's going to stress you. That's going to bring the anxiety. That's going to bring the depression.
mm.
Um, in
Definitely.
as much as it's okay not to be okay, you know, you have to acknowledge and put steps in place to be okay.
Mm.
So you have to be not okay, but make sure that that's a temporary state and not a permanent state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Because it can then feed into your sense of self, your sense of identity, and I believe that's where you mentioned about depression, seeping in. Um, when you are in a sustained, downtrodden type of situation, whether it be temporary, short term, or long term, a lot of the time, finding ways to be okay, even having that small glimmer of hope from one moment to the next can be what helps people to become okay to a certain degree. There's different levels to it, and I think that needs to be acknowledged as well. I remember a saying that one of my friends mentioned, and she said that we are human beings, but we don't know how to be. And a lot of the time, understanding how to accept what you're going through is to be in a state of being. A lot of the time, we're human sayings, we're human thinkings, we're human doings, but we don't know how to be human beings. And that has always resonated with me, especially in relation to this term of it's not okay to be okay. Sometimes we need to be in order to understand what is upsetting us, what is impacting us in order for us to alleviate that stress, that anxiety, and return to some form of state of normalcy for us, to then begin to thrive again.
I think that, and I agree with your friend, we don't know how to be.
Mm.
We tend to look outside rather than look inside.
Yeah.
And we tend to compare ourselves to everyone, not recognizing that we all have our individual purpose.
Mm,
We
mm,
will all have our individual experiences. It's how you handle those experiences.
mm,
The thing is that society, or should I say, the world that we live in, has moved away from some very basic spiritual principles. And that is where, or I should say, that is why we are where we are at in terms of high levels of
mm.
stress and anxiety.
I
Because
agree.
we live in a place where what we see, what we touch, what we smell, these are our realities. But
Mm,
our realities are shaped based on our thinking.
mm, mm,
So if you wake up every morning and you think I gotta go to work because I need to make this money to pay the bills, to buy an iPhone, and you become stressed out with the material realities
yeah.
and trying to keep up with the Joneses, this image thing that is now the big rage all around the world, you know,
Mm,
the promotion of wealth
mm,
as the ideal, and by that I mean physical wealth, having a lot of cash hoarded up somewhere, being
mm,
able to buy um, things that are, in my opinion, not necessary.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, Greed, I think, is why a lot of us are stressed, because we don't understand that true wealth is the ability to think correctly, the ability to be compassionate,
Yeah.
the ability to be kind. Um, it is not about getting up every day and stressing yourself. I got to make so much money. I got to have all of this. Because the reality is that when you're stressed and when you don't have good health, none of those things matter.
Yeah.
None of those
Absolutely.
things matter. It is about building great relationships with others as well as with yourself.
Yeah.
Making sure that you are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually well. I think that that is important.
Yeah. I agree. I
Have
agree.
that place where you can, retreat to. And so the roof is burning. I don't have to stay in the house and watch it burn or feel the heat coming down on my head. I can
Mm-hmm.
go outside.
Mm.
My bank account reads zero. I'm gonna bless that bank account and keep moving on. Um,
Mm.
I think if people come to that place where they can communicate to the God of their understanding directly,
Mm.
that they would be in a better place. That the guidance that they need in terms of what to do in a situation that could be stressful
Mm.
would be given. But
Yeah.
it comes down to the ability to listen
Yeah.
and listen intuitively. And I don't know, you've been here on this planet for a little bit, so but I'm quite sure you've heard people say, my mind was telling me not to do so and so, but I
Yeah.
use reason and logic and past experience to ignore that guidance of my mind and ended up in a lot of chaos.
Mm.
I'm sure for me, I know I've had those situations where I'm being directed intuitively to make certain decisions and I start to overthink.
Mm-hmm.
And by overthinking, I made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
And the wrong choice led to so much confusion. So
Yep.
today I'm in that place where I'm being very mindful, you know, and recognizing that within me there is that Almighty Spirit that can guide and direct.
Mm.
And I'm saying this to say that if we got back to basics, if we got back to identifying as spiritual beings within a human body and a physical body, that a lot of things would be different for us. We would find that place of bliss easily.
Mm.
And you can look around the world, and I like to talk about the American Indians
Mm-hmm.
and their existence before they encounter the European people. Yes, they fight among themselves, but the way they treated the planet, the way they treated the resources of the planet, was one where they took what they needed
Yeah.
rather than take an excess just to hoard up and become very wasteful and to say, well, I have more than you and look at
Yeah.
me. So there's always this competition going on
Yeah.
of people trying to outdo each other rather than going back to that African philosophy of Ubuntu where I exist because you exist. That
Mm.
philosophy that says let us take care of each other
Mm.
rather than saying, well, let me hoard all the oil here. And this is at a very international level. Let me hoard all the oil, and those who want it have to buy it from me at exorbitant prices. Let me go and
Yeah.
harvest all the gold, and those who want it have to pay me for it. It's the same with things like electricity and water
Yeah.
and
Exactly what
basic
we're
things.
seeing now.
Yes, and basic things like food, where you have these big farms controlling what will be grown and what will not be grown. Um, but if people got back to basics
Mm.
and live in harmony with the planet and all the other creatures and beings on the planet,
Mm.
our views will change from struggle and survival to one where we relax and we know that we will always be provided for. Because when you think about it, the earth has enough resources for all of us,
Yes.
for all of us, even in the midst of climate change, the planet knows how to deal with it. And I think we're straying a bit from the topic.
No, it's all very relevant, honestly, because some of these things, people don't understand the interconnectedness of our being as a human being and being connected to everything around us. And a lot of the time that's where the spiraling thoughts can end up, where someone feels very isolated, they feel very disconnected. So this is a beautiful reminder to anyone that might be listening, struggling with relating to others. This is a beautiful reminder to know that it's okay not to be okay. You're not by yourself, and you have the beauty of the planet, the resources around you, to support you through whatever struggles you're going through. So it's all relevant, Sonia. Trust me.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to Einstein. Einstein said that imagination
Mm,
is more powerful than knowledge.
yes,
And I agree with him 100%. Whatever you
absolutely.
can imagine, you can bring about. And if you can just get people to come to that place rather than look and say, okay, I don't have food today, you know, just imagine that you do,
Mm,
and see how that unfolds for you.
yeah.
I was talking to a lady yesterday who said she had surgery. She needed a recliner chair. She said, I'm a big person, so I needed a specific recliner chair. And I had surgery, didn't know how I was going to get to the store. She didn't know how she was going to pay for it because she had no money. She said just as she was about to make herself ready to go to the store, her phone rang and a friend called, and she told the friend, well, I was just trying to get myself ready to go to the store and get a recliner. And the friend said, no, I have one. Tag is still on it. Haven't been used.
Mm,
Just have your husband pick it up.
mm, mm,
And she said it was the perfect fit for her. And I'm just saying that to say that, if we would just relax and know that we are provided for,
mm.
and know that we don't need to stress about things. We don't need to put each other under stress either, because I find that human beings can be so unkind to each other.
Mm.
We become so self centered that we will do things to put another person under unnecessary stress.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And that leads so nicely into my next question, because I think the self-centeredness that we all have, I'm not any different to any other human on this earth, but there are so many different things socially that can prevent us, and internally actually, but so many things that can prevent us from seeking help when we actually need it the most. I wanted to know from your perspective, what types of things actually prevent us from seeking help at the times that we need it most. Um,
I would say that people are afraid to be vulnerable or to
yes,
show vulnerability.
yes,
Um, the other thing is pride.
yes, absolutely.
Pride. Um, those are the two main factors I think that keep us from reaching out for help. I
Mm,
don't want anyone to know that I'm going through this.
mm-hmm,
It is like the
mm-hmm,
woman who's being abused, but because
mm,
she lives in a certain neighborhood, she's perceived as having wealth. Um, she, Her husband is perceived as being, somebody else in society who we would consider to be an executive type of person.
mm,
They
mm.
tend to stay and hide and accept the abuse
Yeah,
because we don't want people to know.
yeah. Honesty. That was going to be my word to add to it.
Yeah, we don't want
Um,
people. It is difficult. It is difficult. I remember, and this is my personal story.
mm,
For me, when I was going through divorce, I didn't want people to know. I,
mm,
it was embarrassing.
mm, mm,
I went through that feeling of embarrassment, failed marriage, and not that we had any issues, but it was a situation of somebody saying publicly, I don't want
mm.
you.
Yeah,
And that was hard for me.
yeah, yeah,
And that was hard, and divorce was stressful, and going through all of that. Your emotions are all over the place. You really don't know what to do. You don't know the outcome of things.
yeah,
It was very stressful.
yeah. And how did you manage that stress during that time? What type of techniques did you use, or practices? Probably maybe the better phrase to use. But how did you overcome that time?
Well, I give God thanks for the spiritual community that I belong to
Mm-hmm.
because that's where I drew my strength from.
Mm,
We do a lot of affirmative prayer and we reach out and someone will do affirmative prayer for you, what we
mm-hmm.
call a spiritual mind treatment. I meditated,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
wrote, I journaled a lot.
Yes, I love
Um,
journaling.
yeah,
It's my go-to practice.
yeah, I journaled a lot. I eventually broke my silence and started talking to
Mm,
locals here about it. When you live on an island where everybody knows everybody, you tend not to want to talk about things that are hurtful.
yeah.
Um, and I started to tell my share with my friends and talk about it and stay grounded.
Mm,
Stay grounded because some friends will give you some very bad advice.
that's
You know,
true.
so you
That's
have to
very
stay
true.
grounded. You just share out of let me be respectful to my friends and let them know so that they understand. I didn't reach out to my friends for emotional support, but more or less just to let them know what was going on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
outside of that, I stayed grounded in my spirituality. I think I became even more grounded in my spirituality,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
So
it comes down to learning how to pray and pray in the right way. For me,
mm,
pray in a way that wasn't asking and begging and pleading, but pray
mm,
in a way that you know if you look at the Lord's Prayer, it is not one of pleading, it is one of acknowledging
mm,
that there's a Father who watches over you, and before you ask, your prayers are already answered. It
mm,
comes down to what are you
mm.
willing to accept, what are you willing to believe for yourself, what good are you willing to hold on to.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's and I appreciate you sharing the personal story because I can understand how difficult that time may have been for you, and also sharing it on such a live platform. So I appreciate you sharing a personal story and how you overcame that situation, because a lot of the time it's very easy for us to fall into the not accepting of help and feeling that we can do it ourselves, and like what you said, the shame and the embarrassment and all of that can seep in to what type of outcome that might look like for you. And I'm going to use this phrase very loosely, but the strong black woman trope that a lot of us fall into, or even men as well, men needing to be strong. I strongly believe a lot of those ideologies can help in many instances, but they can also hinder us as a black community. And in respect of not only your situation, but just generally when people are facing stressful situations and are probably feeling quite anxious about what the future might hold. What's your thoughts on whether those leaning into those types of stereotypes can be helpful or hindrance to the situation?
I'm going to say, I'm going to go with Mark Nichols. Sometimes you have to be broken.
Mm,
And it is in that being broken that you find your strength. Broken doesn't necessarily mean that it is over.
yes.
It just means you have to find that inner strength to heal that place where you go to and say, you know what? I've had my moments of weakness. Now is the time to become strong again. And I like to go back to the Twin Towers and Ground Zero.
Mm,
Because Ground Zero is one of my favorite places. It means that you can start with a new plan
mm-hmm.
and rebuild.
Yes.
So being strong does not necessarily mean that you have to hold everything inside. There are times when you have to become so vulnerable that you let the tears flow, you scream, you put on a
Mm-hmm.
pair of boxing gloves and you hit something, not someone. You just
Yes.
let all of that emotion that is trying to come out, just let
Mm.
it out. There's no
Yeah.
shame in being broken.
Mm.
The only shame is when you stay broken.
Mm. I love
And I
that.
think one of the things that Black people around the world should embrace is the ability to tell their own story.
Yes.
Too often, and I know this as a Caribbean person, too often people tell your story based on appearances
Yes.
and not what is true, because I cannot know what you are feeling in a moment. I
Yes.
cannot know what you're really going through because you are an individual. I am an individual.
Mm.
How you handle things may not be the same way I handle things. And when someone else tells your story, they leave out a lot of the vital,
Yes.
emotional, and psychological things that are going on deep inside of you.
Mm.
And the things that we can't know about each other.
I agree.
Yeah, the things
I
we can't know.
agree.
And I'm saying this as a religious science practitioner, that when I'm dealing with a client, I can know something for a client when I'm doing my affirmative work with that client. But I cannot know what the client knows. I can say, well, I know that Rihanna knows this. You understand? Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what you know.
Yeah. A lot of the time, I don't know what I know.
Right? I can't know how you are feeling,
Mm.
because feeling is a very personal thing.
Yes.
I want to say that for me, I think there is a need for a different type of educating of our people, where we can get them to just move away from the known norm and start embracing some of the unknown things and going way back to
Mm.
ancient African philosophies. I am a very strong believer that the African civilization holds the key to the healing of this planet.
Mm.
And I don't just want to say African in terms of just Black Africans, because Africa, as we know, is a continent with places like the Egyptians, you have the Ethiopians, you have so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but when you study the African way of life, the ancient African way of life, I think that is the way that we were meant to live: take care of each other, take care of the planet.
Mm.
This situation of greed, I need to have all of this to show my worth, is totally unnecessary.
Mm.
And I think that's where people become stressed. I have to have a job that gives me so much money every year. Um, you're stressing yourself out to get that so that you can feel happy and relaxed.
Mm.
Not that people should not be comfortable. I think people should be comfortable. But if what you're doing is causing stress, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you need to revisit what you're doing. Um,
Mm.
I was having a conversation with a colleague this week, and we were discussing jobs and working. And for me, I have to feel passion for what I'm doing.
Mm.
And I said I no longer want to be in a situation of survival mode where you're just working for money, but I want to work because I love what I'm doing and
Mm.
I enjoy helping people. So that's where my thinking is at. Let me
Sorry.
help as many people as possible by bringing them to that place where they can live a stress-free life, or should I say, as stress-free as possible, a life.
Yeah.
It's getting people
Absolutely.
back to basis of understanding. You cannot just take care of your physical needs. You have to take care of your emotional, psychological, and
Mm.
spiritual needs.
Definitely. Definitely.
Man
And
at his greatest is a triune being.
mm. So I wanted to ask you one of our final questions because you mentioned about um, passion, and this made me think about how we cultivate joy, and even just reflecting back on your previous responses about how you use the beach to support your mental and emotional balance, but from a cultural perspective, some of the things that we can use to help keep stress and anxiety at bay, how can we cultivate continuous joyous moments to help us through these difficult times that we may be facing?
I'm going to say that for me,
Hmm.
the best way for me is to sit in the silence. It is to communicate with the God of my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way for me. I find joy in that. I find that bliss in doing that.
Hmm.
But outside of that spiritual element, I would encourage people to dance if you want to
Yes.
sing your blues away if you want
Yes.
to find an art form that really resonates with you. But most of all, I would encourage people to practice self love,
Yes.
to practice self care. Take yourself out on a date, dress up nicely and take yourself out. But being mindful, always be mindful that the most important person in your life is you.
Mm,
If you cannot take care of you, you wouldn't be able to take care of anyone else.
absolutely.
Yeah, you have to take care of you. And, uh, you know, there's another colleague of mine who talks about sacred selfishness.
Oh.
Practice some of that. The ability to say no. You cannot be all things to all people.
Mm,
So the ability to say no sometimes is very important.
definitely.
You want to find
Definitely
joy,
agree.
you got to find it within yourself. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself first.
Mm,
Nothing wrong with doing that.
definitely. And I find especially people that are in positions of service where they are healers or um, frontline workers, or however you may phrase it, a lot of the time we find it difficult to put ourselves first and step away from, I guess, the noise of society and just to hone in within. So that's a beautiful point to end the show on. Sonia, it's been amazing talking to you. And before we go, would you please tell our viewers on what's coming up next for you and what current projects do you have that people can find out more about?
Well, I am currently working on getting the Lotus Blossom Foundation up and running, fully functional.
Okay.
And
What is the
Lotus,
Lotus Blossom?
well, it is a place of healing. It
Mm,
is that bridge that one would cross over. You know, it is a place for spiritual guidance
hmm.
and support.
Amazing. Is that
Yes.
based in Barbados?
I would like to say yes, it is based in Barbados, but it is being offered around the world because I'm offering virtual
Right.
assistance to those who need assistance. I think that with technology being the way it is, why stay in Barbados?
Absolutely.
Why
Absolutely.
stay in Barbados? The whole objective is to help the world to heal.
Mm,
And the only way that we can do that is through a shift in consciousness.
mm,
So that's what I'm working on. In addition to that, I'm going to be offering courses on how to heal your life.
mhm.
Working on that diligently. There's so
Yeah.
much to do. Basically into education,
Mhm.
education and spiritual therapy, so to speak. Because
Amazing.
I believe that if people can take a look at where they're at and where they want to go and bring that spiritual element to it, learn how to
Mm,
communicate with God, and really listen inwardly,
mm,
that this planet will have better days, that the generations coming after us would have better days and better lifestyles. There will be
mm,
more caring towards each other.
mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm working on, getting the Lotus Blossom Foundation fully
Yeah.
functional.
Yes. Amazing. And this is definitely something that is so needed, especially right now as we are seeing a lot happening worldwide. Um, we won't go into it, but definitely reach out to Sonia if you are in need of some support. Sonia, where can people find you so that way they can either, back your
Um,
projects or just reach out for some spiritual guidance and support?
I'm on Facebook
Mhm.
under the name the Pink Lotus Health Investments.
Okay, amazing.
Yes, that's where I'm at. Pink
Lovely.
Lotus Health Investments. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, people, make sure you reach out to Sonia, Pink Lotus Health Investments on Facebook. Um, and once again, I just want to thank you for being a guest on this show. Today, we've been talking about it's okay not to be okay, and how stress and anxiety impacts us as a community, but also how to overcome it, how to heal, and how to seek, as Sonia says, some spiritual guidance. So, thank you very much, Sonia. It's been a blessing as always.
Oh,
And
thanks for having me on.
thank you very much. Um, and viewers, make sure you join us next week for Black Mental Health Matters show, where you will also be fulfilled with and edifying conversations around Black mental health. This is your host, Rihanna, and have a blessed and most beautiful day. Take care. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, where are we?
Just trying to end it. 1 second. Um, doesn't seem to want to end for us. Can't even see my screen.